Aloha and welcome back. Today we are going to take a look at breaking points with Crystal and Sagar beyond the headlines. But this is not actually Crystal or Sagar doing the interview. But it is an interview of Green Party candidate Butch Ware. So we're going to check this out.
Okay, so Butch Ware, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
My pleasure, brother. Good to be with you. Glad you could make the trip up.
Absolutely. So I think the first place to start with is you running for governor of California. Why do you want to run? Why now?
So coming out of the 2024 presidential election cycle, where I ran as the VP candidate with Dr. Jill Stein, one of the things that we heard that was both a fair and unfair criticism is where's the Green Party between presidential
Where's
elections?
the Green Party?
And the part about that that's unfair is that, there are literally hundreds of elected Greens across the country. People are running and occupying different positions and so forth. We just don't get any media coverage. So, mainstream media has us continuously blacked out. But the part about the critique that's fair is that the Green Party absolutely needs to be building power in between electoral cycles. And when I analyzed the situation in the state of California from an electoral standpoint, I realized that this is not just the place where I live. It's not just the communities that I love, communities that I'm in service to. But this is the best place to break the duopoly.
So the goal is to win. It's not necessarily to shift the Overton window or get people talking about different ideas. It is to actually potentially win the election.
100%. So, I mean, just for context, Democrats and Republicans colluded to try to make it so that nobody else can get on the field. And what that means is we have a jungle primary, June 2nd of 2026, only the top two candidates advance. And that's designed throughout the country and a bunch of places that have that to make sure that only Democrats and Republicans are on the playing field and that the independent parties never have a fair shot. But it can backfire in a state like California, where we have as many registered independents as you have registered Republicans. The state leans hard enough liberal, progressive, even some radicals, that voter base can very easily, you can get to second very easily. So for example, in the 2022 gubernatorial election, the second place finisher to Gavin Newsom got 1.25 million votes, 17.7% of the electorate, and that got him into the general election. If we get 1.3, 1.4 million votes in June of 2026, we will absolutely be in the two position. And then whoever that Democrat is going to have to deal with me on a debate stage between June and November. They will not be able to
That would be great to see Butch Ware on the debate stage.
box us out. They will have to
I think
cover
we
us.
win California,
That
though.
Republican candidate the last time around got 40% of the vote in the general. We absolutely will bury the Democrats if they have to deal with me, because all of the things that they say that they are about in terms of serving their constituents, the Green Party actually serves those constituencies and does it in a way that isn't polarizing, isn't culture war, isn't going to alienate a bunch of independent and conservative voters.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the platform then in terms of building this coalition. Because I saw on your website you wrote a number of things that you guys really are trying to bring to the forefront of the conversation: clean energy, human rights, immigration, housing, healthcare, education. So I want to go through some of these things.
Let's do it.
To see where you actually stand. So maybe a big one right now, the topic of immigration, right? The border. What's your position on that?
So the first thing that I'll say is that as governor of the state of California, my oath and the oath of any elected official is to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America, not to swear fealty to whoever happens to be the sitting president at any given time. So what that means is that as governor of the state of California, I will not comply with any unconstitutional order. And the efforts to utilize ICE, which is essentially a kind of Gestapo police force that was founded after 9/11 and profited from the Islamophobia. And as a practicing Muslim, I knew all about that Islamophobia up close and personal. Many of us said at that time, y'all are going to regret empowering this kind of institution to violate people's civil liberties. Due process is to be respected, period, full stop. And the way that they're essentially using this as an opportunity to racially profile our Latin brothers and sisters, I ain't having it. And we will use the resources of the state to defend the residents of the state.
I wanted to drill into that a little bit more because I was
Sure.
looking up some of the numbers. Because right now it's getting reported a lot. People like Kilmar, Garcia,
Yep,
Abrego,
Abrego,
these
Garcia,
kinds
yeah,
of
exactly.
situations. But I was looking at some of the stats in the past. I think the Obama administration was doing very similar things. They're pulling people off the street, sometimes mistakenly pulling people, Americans off the street, detaining them, but it just wasn't being talked about. So is right now the situation any
It is okay when the Democrats do it.
different than it was before? Or is it just media narrative?
Excellent question. So another example of this same phenomenon is that there's been a big media outcry about the fact that the Trump administration has toddlers essentially representing themselves in immigration hearings because they're not being provided with legal services, don't get legal representation. I'm old enough to remember that being a thing in the Obama presidency. That goes back to 2014. So the theatrics of power for the neo.
So this is what we mean when we say there's really no difference in the parties. There's no difference. Like, they do the same things. The Democrats just speak a nicer game. They're a little slicker in how they talk, I guess. I hear it. I don't see I don't see how they're so slick to other people. But still, they do the same thing. They're the party of the crime bill. Just so much stuff. It's just I don't get it. Like, I get it, but
Liberal Democrats is to conceal those things which would violate the sensibilities of.
Hey, you might have seen me before, but you've never seen.
Oh.
And best of all,
Especially white liberals, but then also marginalized communities. So they do them under cover of night. The theatrics of power for the explicitly white supremacist Trump regime. And it's not to say that all conservatives are white supremacists, at least not any more than liberals usually are. But it's rather that this regime uses a theatrics of white supremacy in order to throw red meat to his base, in order to galvanize a certain portion of the base.
Kind of pivoting off of the human rights of migrants, I'm kind of seeing the similar.
Throw red meat to his base in order to galvanize.
There's marijuana on this flag. Is that marijuana on this flag here for the Confederacy? I don't think I've ever seen that before. I think it is.
Of the base.
Kind of pivoting off of the human rights of migrants, I'm kind of seeing the similar phenomenon with housing, where you're talking about unhoused people all over the place in California, especially. And
It was really bad in Hawaii too.
seems like the state has poured a lot of money into this issue, $24 billion over the last 5 years.
Housing
And
first.
the number of homeless has gone up. So what do you think the situation here is in California?
Right.
And what are the legitimate challenges versus whether this being kind of an industrial complex, which I've reported on in the last year or so? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, so this is where we are with late stage corporate capitalism, is that everything is an industry that corporations are able to maximize the profit that they extract from it, even poverty. So poverty industrial complex is a real thing. Over the last 5 years, $25 billion spent by the state of California. So that's our tax dollars, yours and mine tax dollars, and the rest of California residents. And to connect this with the last question, yes, undocumented people pay taxes as well, right? Migrants pay taxes as well. So this is everybody's tax dollars that are being thrown at the problem of homelessness. And homelessness has increased by 50% in the state of California in the same time period. Now, why is that? The reason is that all of that money is filtered first through a middleman strata of corporations and nonprofits whose job is to administer the problem, and they function essentially the same way that the big pharmaceutical companies do. Is that it's better for business to continuously treat the symptoms than it is to cure the disease. They need homeless people. They need abject poverty because it is literally a multi-billion-dollar industry to administer the homeless problem.
And plus, it keeps you motivated to work minimum wage jobs and low wage jobs. Like, if that's all you got, that's all you got, because you don't want to be homeless, right? So you'll work this low wage job and then work a second or third job and do some Uber and stuff, so you don't have to be on the street.
People cash six-figure checks annually. Some of them push close to seven-figure checks in the nonprofit sector. Imagine this, right? I mean, it's a
crazy.
kind of lunacy. So a quick study shows that the average over the last 5 years of homeless people in any given night in the state of California, people on the street, is 181,000 people. That's the average across the last 5 years on any given night. You could take the $25 billion that has been spent on that middleman complex, and you could write a check annually to every last one of those people for $28,000, and you would still come in under what the state of California has spent on homelessness. Now, the minimum threshold for being formally declared as living in poverty in the United States is something like 18K per person, which is insanely low, of course, for a state like California. But the point is you could literally write people personal checks that would get them out of poverty, and it would cost you less than what we have dumped. You literally might as well be taking your cash, lighting it on fire. Like, honest to God, I do not care about people's ideological predilections. This is not a question about, being a leftist or a conservative. This is just like corruption. Yeah. Corruption that, that has, a lot of, fancy words around it, but, it's just lipstick on a pig, like we used to say back home. Like, this is just corruption. And it can be rooted out.
Speaking of corruption, another big industry that's corrupt is the healthcare industry. We can obviously, I think across the political spectrum, as you just talked about, everybody knows that there's something wrong with the healthcare system, right? We have CEOs getting killed in the street. We have people, dying without access to healthcare and insurance and these type of things. And even see some more of the conservative voices out there. I remember a few weeks ago, Joe Rogan even said on this podcast, like, it doesn't make any sense why, living in the richest country, you can go bankrupt if you break your leg and things like that. So what can you do as California governor that's different to give Californians more access to healthcare?
When Brian Thompson, United Healthcare executive got de-brained in downtown Manhattan, the overall response of the American public across the ideological spectrum was 2 tears in a bucket.
When you're born to do something,
No one cared. And the reason is that every single one of us has been harmed by this for-profit insurance scam that we have in the United States of America and that we have in the state of California. The Democrats actually passed what's called single-payer health care, essentially universal health care in the state of California when Schwarzenegger was governor.
Nice.
Because they knew he would veto it. This is the
So that's like right now, Bernie and Pramila Jayapal are trying to get universal health care like in the Senate or somewhere, right? Because Trump is in office and they know that it won't pass, and that the Republicans have the Senate and the House of Representatives, so it won't pass anywhere, right? They didn't do this 8 months ago or 2 years ago when Joe Biden was in office, or they didn't do it when we had a national pandemic, or not even a worldwide pandemic, right? They didn't push the universal health care then when Joe Biden was in, when Democrats, or they didn't do it when Barack was in. I guess Pramila Jayapal wasn't there, but Bernie Sanders was. So they wait, just like they did in California on the national level and probably in all kinds of other states. They wait until there's a Republican in office so they can push and make the Republican look bad. But yeah, so that's the game plan.
Performative politics of the Democrat Party,
exactly.
At its finest. Like chef's kiss for this one, fellas. Because as soon as the Democrats got in power, we just can't get it passed. always within just a couple of votes, sort of like the mansion and cinema thing, you know, right? There's always just enough Democrats standing in the way of what the base says that they want. It's almost like you think they're doing it on purpose because they are not allowed to violate the interests of the corporate overlords that run the Democrat Party.
Right, because the duopoly is the oligarchy.
So what happened the most recent time, 2022? All of the insiders said that the votes were there. Single payer health care is ready to pass in the state of California. The insurance industry laid $1 million down on the Democrat Party, and the votes, those last little votes disappeared overnight, and we still don't have universal health care. Now, why is this important? Not just for us in the state of California, but nationwide. And the reason is that, so General Motors nationwide pays more for health care than it pays for steel.
That's a crazy statistic.
Crazy statistic.
Yeah.
Crazy statistic. So why am I citing it in this context? I'm citing it in this context because imagine the environment for small businesses in the state of California if you no longer have to worry about covering your employees' health care costs.
That's
so
a big
I'm a small
thing.
business owner. And, you know, I can't compete against the big corporations because their scale allows them to provide medical benefits for all of their employees, right? And so not having universal health care is actually insanely costly. If we had it and nobody else has it, it puts California businesses at a massive competitive advantage. It's going to draw commerce to the state of California on a huge scale, and it's also going to reorient the proportionality of that.
I think it would draw a lot of workers to the state of California too. I think the workers would go there, even if the businesses didn't go there first. I think a lot of workers would go there because that, like, everybody wants healthcare, right? And then when there's a lot of workers there, they're working at any place, but then more jobs will go there again because, yeah, especially small businesses or the people that go there, the workers, if there aren't businesses there that they want to work at, they'll be able to open businesses because they won't have to worry about paying for healthcare. So I think that'll be really, really good.
Commerce. The small business will be on a more equal footing with those
Yes.
large, corporate businesses that can afford to cover those healthcare costs now, while us small guys can't.
So I do, because you talked about the Democrats a bunch there. So I wanted to ask you,
Sure.
right now, nationwide level, I think there's a lot of opposition to what Trump's talking about with
Yeah.
a number of issues that we've already discussed, and there seems to be sort of this resistance wing of the party that's building. I think Cenk Uygur the other day announced some kind of rebellion.
Oh my gosh.
Similar to what we saw with the Justice Democrats, the AOC, the Squad crowd. So it seems like that's happening again. Do you have any comments about that, or the Fight the Oligarchy tour that Bernie is on? Is it? I know what their stated goal is, but what do you think their actual goal is?
You cannot fight the oligarchy without fighting the duopoly. Let's see what Butch has to say.
It's different than the stated goal.
Excellent. So Bernie Sanders and AOC Pelosi, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they have one function. Their function is to keep an independent third party from emerging.
Man.
That is their job. That is why they are out there on speaking tours. That's what the uncommitted movement was about in 2024.
That's crazy.
A lot of people joined that movement and later found out that it was founded by Democrat operatives whose sole function was
Dude, the Democratic ops, they are out, man. When they talk about the ops, they are talking about the Democrats. They are everywhere. I can't believe I got in the Green Party in December of 2024. So like 6 months. And wow, I already knew a lot about politics, but just trying to really push a third party and talk about it in a different way, in a pushing way, the amount of Democratic ops out there has blown my mind. Like, literally, almost everything that's like not the Green Party is just about a Democratic op when they say they're progressive. It's crazy.
that they had seen the polling that Muslim voters were abandoning Joe Biden and also Kamala Harris, and so the goal was to say we're create uncommitted, because they knew that we weren't going to go to Republicans. I'm Muslim, so I can include myself in that and therefore that group was going to go and do that thing that everybody says that we need. They were going to go and support a third party. So instead, the Democrats they always create these sheepdog movements that are designed to shepherd people back onto the Democrat plantation.
And they are
That's
so
their
good at
job.
The number one reason why
2016, Bernie Sanders, what did he do? He energized a progressive populist base and then hands them off to Hillary. 2020.
And they didn't even want to go. And the Democrats didn't even want them. It was crazy. And had he passed into the Green Party or DSA, today would be a different day.
20 energizes that group, hands them off to Biden. 2024,
Yeah.
both Bernie and AOC say you have to vote for Killer Kamala. You have to vote for the genocider. She's not the genocider in chief. I guess she's the second in command of the genociders at that point in time. So fool me once, shame on me. Fool me 2 times, fool me 3 times, fool me 4 times. How many times do they get to run this game? So I'm a historian. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't predict the future. But the one thing that I know for sure is that whatever is coming, the Democrats will not protect us from it. Because if they could have protected us from it, they would have protected us from it.
But they don't want to.
They are going to continue the corporate.
It's not if they could, they would. If they wanted to, they would. They could, they don't want to. The Green Party could, if you fill it up and give it the power to do so, we'll do so. And you'll be part of it. And you'll do so for yourself and for others too. But the Democratic Party has no political will to do anything very different than the Republicans outside of the oligarchy.
Predict the future. But the one thing that I know for sure is that whatever is coming, the Democrats will not protect us from it. Because if they could have protected us from it, they would have protected us from it. And they are going to continue the corporate sell-off of that party until that party is no more.
So he got to where I was saying, I mean, I agree with him, but I just think he kind of worded it a little bit wrong. Like, not if they could, they would. They don't, because like he said, they sold off to the corporate powers or whatnot. They don't want to because they're sold off, right? So if they wanted to, they would. Not necessarily if they could, they would.
And they are going to continue the corporate sell-off of that party until that party is no more.
I want to give you a chance to build this coalition, because like I do know that there are, maybe the perception of the Green Party is this kind of far left radical party.
Radical.
And there's kind of this purity test that people...
Why is it radical to want everybody to have housing, everybody to have a living wage, everybody to have health care, everybody to have a decent education, everybody to have food? Why is that radical? Especially when it can be provided.
Talk about, I just want to point to your comment on trans rights, and especially playing in sports, because you, I think, said, the quote that I have here is, I don't think that biological males should play in female sports. I think it gives an unfair competitive advantage. And then you were later called out for being transphobic, and then you kind of walked that back and said that was not in the context of what you're saying. But what I'm wondering is, as kind of, I think on this issue, you know, I support trans people. People should do whatever they want to do, but then there seems to be some sort of unfair advantage that we've clearly seen. So why is that a transphobic comment? Do you think that is a transphobic comment?
So first, on trans rights, you know, globally, again, nobody deserves to have their basic rights and civil liberties disregarded because somebody doesn't like their identity. The question was, and this is the part that was edited out, is that I was asked about my personal opinion on that question. But my policy position is a different position. I don't think that it's the state's job to try to mandate bans against trans people participating in sports. I don't actually think that that's the government's job. I think that that is one of those places where discrimination comes down. And I essentially, what was in the back of my head was that I'm endorsing the IOC position, the International Olympic Committee's position, which is to say that it is the job of elite athletic competition to balance between the right of inclusion and the right of competitors to compete on an equal playing field. That's it.
So then so if the NCAA says, hey, if you were once a biological male and you're not, and now you've transitioned, you're still not allowed to play in women's sports, you would just kind of bow out of that issue and say, hey, the governing body said that's the case. I'm not in a position, I'm not an expert on this, and I'm going to let them rule on their athletes.
Well, one on that, you can't be an expert on everything, right? And so if you're like, what would you do with a nuclear power plant or something like that, right? You know, I would talk to the experts and find out. Like, I don't know. You know, if you want to use it for energy or you want to shut it down, but either way, you would have. I would need to talk to the experts if I was in charge, right? I wouldn't be able to do it on my own, and I don't think anybody would be able to do it on their own. But like when it comes to trans issues, there's a lot of stuff that straight men and straight women don't know, right? Like if you're not trans, and like I've had a few trans friends, and I'm still, you know, I don't talk on the issue with a lot of authority, other than I think that trans people are people and that they should be in, you know, whatever makes you happy type of deal is what, or whatever, you know, whatever's best for you in your mind. That's fine with me, type of stuff. But when it comes to like sports and some certain other things, and like when it comes to kids and things, you know, I think that's a family thing. That's a doctor thing that they need to talk to with the family and the doctors and the kids and the stuff. And I don't think it, like he's saying, I don't think it should be a state thing or a government thing, because everybody's different and people have different experiences. And my experience isn't the same as a trans person. And I've had a lot of people disregard my experience as a black person. But they don't understand my experience, and they didn't grow up like me, and so I didn't grow up that way. I didn't grow up trans, so I don't know exactly how it feels to be a kid like that. But you know, so again, I think, and it seems like he's kind of on a similar page, that it should be up to the people, the family, the doctors, the kids. But you guys talk, it should be talked about and it should be thought about. And then too, I think as a society, when there's a thing like that, a new thing kind of in society, like left-handedness, like maybe even so, like the sexual revolution in the 70s or 60s or whenever it was, kind of like you should study that. Like if people are going to make choices that you don't agree with, not everybody in society, but like the people in society that run society should kind of study the stuff that people do, and then after 10 years, after 20 years, after 30 years, after 50 years, kind of say the results of what we're finding on this stuff. And then you'll have some trans kids that transitioned early and some trans kids that didn't. They transitioned later. And then after they grow up and live their entire life, and you can ask them stuff, and right, and then we have a few more after 50 years. Now we have some information about this, and we might know more about it and what better to do. But when stuff is kind of newer, you just gotta, I don't know, you know, you gotta kind of figure it out, really.
I doubt that they would use the term biological male, you know, in that context. But if they're going to say that, you know, a trans woman that, you know, transitions after, you know, puberty, or, you know, what, again, I'm confessing to not being an expert
Right.
in, you know, the medical parameters that would be utilized to make such a decision. Like, what would be the basis on which I would then say, no? You know, like the NCAA has this wrong, and, you know, Professor Butch Ware, now Governor Butch Ware, says that, you know, it should be, you know, X, Y, or Z. Like, part of actual representative democracy is like actually ceding to qualified authorities
Right.
the authority to
Finding
do
the right
their
people.
jobs and to make the decisions that they need to make.
Right, and I think that to kind of end our conversation today, I wanted to ask a more broad question, because you talked about culture war, and I think this is one of those things that, you know, these are issues that are deliberately injected into the public discourse in order to create division.
100%.
And something that I've really been wondering to myself is the broader question of like, what is an American, right? I think that's a question that we need to really understand if we want to kind of heal the nation, because it used to be in the past, for better or for worse, right? If you were an American, that meant you were probably white and you're probably Christian. We've since kind of moved on. Civil rights movement, we said, hey, you don't need to be white to be an American. You can be black, you can be brown, all these things. These are good things.
People still got issues with
Inclusion.
that.
So that's where we're kind of getting disjointed, is in that, okay, so now we don't agree that there's disagreement now in terms of your physical attributes and things like that. So what I wanted to ask you is, what does it mean? What are the qualities or attributes that tie us together? If we all look different, we have different cultural backgrounds, levels of social.
Listen, man, some of us, our ancestors were brought here in chains. That's the case for my ancestors. You know, going back to Ware County in the state of Georgia, and you know, on my father's side, you know, both of his grandmothers were also part indigenous, Seminole, you know, Native American. So we don't all have the same relationship, you know, to that. You know, normative definition of what constitutes an American. For somebody like me, who's so I have two grandfathers that both served this country, one white, one black. Guess which one? Guess which side of my family is buried at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia?
Right. It's
You don't. Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to guess. You know it's the white side.
so it's an experience being a mixed person in America. Like I'm half black, half white, like Butch said, and my families do get treated differently, and I do see the difference, and I do go to different areas, and it is an experience being mixed. I would say that.
Side. So they both served this country, and this country served them very differently in return. We can't make America great again because America was never great for a bunch of us,
Right, a lot
including
of
Chinese
people.
exclusion acts and others, right? That it wasn't just a black and a red thing, that this is a white supremacy thing that has been hardwired into our history. But alongside that has been this effort to extend those incredibly precious and sacred rights and liberties to as many people as we could. And that is a struggle that Malcolm played his role in, that I'm trying to play my role in today. That is a sacred
am
fight
I.
in a cause that's worth fighting for. So it has to be our ideals. Ideals that are rooted in justice, ideals that are rooted in liberty, ideals that are rooted in freedom. That is what will bring us together.
Can I ask you a question about the
Please.
white supremacy? Because you
Sure.
brought this up a bunch of times, and I'm just curious just to clarify what you think that means. Because I think a lot of conservatives or the Republican Party would push back on that characterization to say, oh, well, we have Vivek in our camp, we have Tim Scott, we have a number of different people in our group that's not white. So how could we be white supremacists?
I mean, there's a lot of black white supremacists. Kamala Harris was engaged in prosecuting a white supremacist genocide in Gaza. And that's not just me saying it. That's Jewish Voice for Peace that has characterized this as a white supremacist, genocide. So bell hooks, whose book is not behind me because it's at my home, office. Bell hooks, great black feminist, theorist, said that we need to stop talking about white supremacy as a white people's problem. White supremacy is embedded in our institutions, and it's embedded in the way that our society has been wired to to function. That goes back to the fact that at the foundation, when those lofty ideals about representative democracy were first framed, there was also a compromise on the issue of slavery, and the southern states got to count their slaves as 3/5 of the population for purposes of representation, but those slaves were not getting to vote in anything. And when you start talking about that, that makes people uncomfortable, but it's a reality that whiteness has been structurally and systematically rewarded. Now, the fact that there are people of...
So that's why Charlie Kirk hates DEI. He wants his privilege back. He wants to keep it to where only certain people can get the job and other people don't even get looked at.
Color that participate in institutions of white supremacy does not make them any less white supremacists.
Angela Rye.
I was every bit as appalled when Tyree Nichols was killed by 5 black police officers in the city of Memphis, as I was when George Floyd was choked out by a white police officer with an Asian police officer watching it. The structures of oppression are the things that we're supposed to be fighting against.
Exactly.
And the reason for that is that there is actually underneath this fomented culture war a set of principles that have been honored more in the breach than in the observance, right? But that are still deeply meaningful to a lot of Americans that come from different places. And that idea of liberty, representative democracy, and that power should be for the people rather than for the wealthy. And that's why we're going to win in California, because California's got too much sense to keep falling in with this same, foolishness.
Hawaii too. We got a governor running for Hawaii.
Thank you so much for your time.
Her name is... Well, where'd my thing go? Oh, no. Of course. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, pause. Okay, sorry about that. I lost my Windows something. Anyway, Anna Pullman. She's running for what did I say? Oh yeah, governor of Hawaii. So also with Butch Ware in California, Hawaii is a very progressive state. Check out Anna Pullman, POHLMAN, and keep coming back to Across the Spectrum to keep coming up with more news and stuff.